I didn't realize something was wrong until my garage door wouldn't open. When I stepped outside, I saw heavy chains wrapped across it, padlocked tight, like someone was trying to seal it permanently. A notice was taped to the wall claiming violations and warning me not to interfere. The HOA president had ordered it shut. He said it was for compliance. He said it was temporary. He said I should be grateful it wasn't a fine. What he didn't understand was that chaining a garage shut isn't enforcement. It's a safety hazard. And the moment the fire marshal arrived, his authority didn't just get questioned, it got shut down. The garage had never been an issue before. It was attached to my house, fully functional and used every day. I parked my car there, stored tools and household items, and relied on it as the main entry point to my home. Nothing inside was unsafe. Nothing blocked exits. Nothing had ever been flagged during any previous HOA walkthroughs or inspections. For years, the HOA barely paid attention to garages at all. As long as doors were closed and nothing spilled into common areas, they stayed out of it. That unspoken understanding was one of the few things that made living in the neighborhood easy. Then the HOA elected a new president. He was aggressive about enforcement from the start. Emails went out about compliance sweeps and zero tolerance for violations. The language was vague, but the tone was unmistakable. He wanted to be seen as someone who took control seriously. At first, it didn't concern me. My garage was clean. The door worked properly. There were no hazards, no clutter, no modifications. Even if someone looked inside, there was nothing to object to. Still, I noticed him paying attention. He slowed down when he passed my house. He glanced toward the garage if the door was open. Once or twice, he stopped and took a photo from the sidewalk. There was never a knock, never a notice, never a request to inspect anything. Then came the email. He claimed the HOA had identified a garage compliance issue at my address, and that corrective action would be taken if the issue wasn't addressed immediately. When I replied asking what the issue was, he didn't answer directly. He said the board had discretion to act in the interest of safety and that further enforcement could occur without additional notice. That response didn't make sense. No inspection had happened. No hazard had been identified. No explanation had been given. I assumed it was bluff, another attempt to intimidate residents into compliance without doing the work to justify it. I was wrong. Because the next morning I walked outside and realized the HOA president hadn't been threatening enforcement. He had already carried it out, and he'd done it in a way that turned my garage from a safe, everyday space into something dangerous. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the chains. They weren't loose. They weren't symbolic. Thick metal links were wrapped tightly around the garage door tracks and padlocked at the center. A laminated notice was taped beside them, stamped with the HOA letterhead and marked, "Do not remove." According to the notice, my garage had been closed due to unresolved violations and would remain inaccessible until further action was taken. No warning, no inspection, no explanation. I immediately emailed the HOA president and asked what violation justified chaining my garage shut. I pointed out that the garage was attached to my home, that it was a primary entry point, and that blocking it created a safety issue. His reply came quickly. He said the HOA had the authority to restrict access to non-compliant structures. He said the action was temporary. He said removing the chains would be considered interference with enforcement and could result in fines. I asked what specific hazard existed. He didn't answer that. Instead, he warned me again not to touch the chains. That's when concern turned into alarm. Because this wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous. If there were an emergency, the garage door couldn't be opened from the outside. If there were a fire inside the garage, access would be delayed. If I needed to leave quickly, one of my exits had been physically blocked. I walked around the house, checking the door from every angle. There was no emergency release accessible from outside. The chains weren't designed to be removed quickly. Neighbors started noticing. One asked why my garage was chained shut. Another joked that it looked like a crime scene. Someone else pointed out that blocking an attached garage didn't seem legal. I contacted the HOA management company and sent photos. I asked them to explain how physically chaining a garage shut complied with safety standards. Their response was cautious. They said they were reviewing the situation and advised me to follow the HOA president's instructions in the meantime. That wasn't reassuring. I then contacted a licensed contractor friend and showed him photos. He immediately told me the same thing. Chaining a garage shut could create a serious fire hazard, especially if the garage was attached to the house. He suggested I contact the fire department or fire marshal immediately. That suggestion made everything click. This wasn't about HOA rules. This wasn't about compliance. This was about safety codes. I called the fire marshal's office and explained what had happened, that my HOA president had chained my attached garage shut without inspection or authorization. I sent photos. I explained that it blocked access and egress. The response was immediate. They asked for the address. They asked who had installed the chains. They asked whether any permits or notices had been issued. None had. They told me someone would be sent out. When I informed the HOA president that the fire marshal was coming, his tone changed for the first time. He said it wasn't necessary. He said the chains were only temporary. He suggested we could work it out without outside involvement. But the chains stayed, and by then the issue had moved far beyond an HOA dispute. Because if the fire marshal confirmed what everyone else already suspected, the HOA president wasn't just overstepping. He was creating a hazard that no amount of authority could excuse. The fire marshal arrived less than an hour later. He didn't park down the street. He pulled directly into the driveway, stepped out in full uniform, and immediately stopped short when he saw the garage. The chains caught his attention instantly. He walked closer, examined the padlock, followed the metal links across the door tracks, and then looked back at me. He asked one question before anything else: who did this? I told him it was the HOA president. I showed him the emails. I showed him the notice taped to the wall. I explained that no inspection had taken place and that I had been warned not to remove the chains. The fire marshal didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He said the words that changed everything. "This is a serious safety violation." He explained that chaining shut an attached garage created multiple hazards. It blocked emergency access. It interfered with egress. It could delay firefighters during a response. And if there were a fire inside the garage, the delay could cost lives. Then he said something even more damning. It didn't matter why the garage had been chained. It didn't matter what the HOA claimed. There was no scenario where an HOA had the authority to physically block a garage door. While he was still documenting the scene, the HOA president arrived. At first, he tried to sound confident. He said the chains were temporary. He said they were meant to enforce compliance. He said the board had authorized the action. The fire marshal stopped him mid-sentence. He explained, clearly and firmly, that what had been done violated fire code. He said the garage had been rendered unsafe. He said the action was unauthorized, dangerous, and completely outside HOA authority. The HOA president tried to push back. He said he believed he was acting responsibly. He said he didn't realize it was a safety issue. He said the chains could be removed if necessary. The fire marshal didn't negotiate. He ordered the chains removed immediately. Not later, not after a meeting. Immediately. He also informed the HOA president that the violation would be documented and reported. He warned that any repeat action could result in citations and penalties, and he made it very clear that future interference with access points could bring far more serious consequences. The HOA president's posture collapsed. The padlock was cut. The chains fell to the ground. The garage door was freed. What had been framed as enforcement just minutes earlier was now officially classified as a hazard, and standing there with the chains removed and the authority shift complete, it was obvious to everyone watching. The HOA president hadn't just gone too far. He had crossed a line that fire safety law does not forgive. Once the chains were removed, the garage returned to what it had always been: accessible, functional, safe. The fire marshal finished his report before leaving. He confirmed in writing that the garage had been improperly restricted and that the action constituted a fire safety violation. He also made it clear that no HOA had the authority to block access to an attached garage under any circumstances. Later that evening, I received an email from the HOA management company. It wasn't from the president. It stated that the action taken against my garage had been unauthorized, that the board would be reviewing enforcement procedures, and that no further action would be taken regarding my property. Any references to violations were withdrawn. A few days later, a notice went out to the entire neighborhood reminding residents and board members that emergency access points, including garages, must never be obstructed. Fire code was cited specifically. The HOA president never contacted me again about the garage. In fact, his behavior changed after that. He stopped making on-the-spot enforcement decisions. He stopped issuing vague warnings, and anything that resembled urgent action suddenly went through proper channels. Neighbors who had seen the chains started talking. Some admitted they'd been uncomfortable watching how aggressively the HOA had been enforcing rules. Others said they'd always assumed the board had more power than it actually did. That assumption was gone now. As for me, the experience left one thing very clear. HOAs can manage rules, they can issue notices, they can request compliance, but they cannot endanger people, they cannot block exits, they cannot override safety codes, and they cannot invent authority where the law has drawn a hard line. In the end, I didn't need to argue or escalate. I just needed the right authority to show up. And once that happened, everything fell back into place. Exactly where safety and the law say it belongs.